I'm Jane Turton, Chief Executive of All3 Media, and I'm delighted to be joined this morning by Paul Buccieri, who is the President of A&E as recently as this January. He moved from Los Angeles to New York and took on this exciting and enormous new job. Before A&E, Paul chaired ITV Studios in America and was the boss of their international production business. And I'm here today to ask him some questions, hopefully some nice probing, difficult questions, and also to invite you guys to add anything to my question list that you would like to know from him. Paul has been a colleague of mine for many years. He's been a competitor for a bit. He's now a customer, and I guess most important, actually, I should declare now that he's a proper friend. So I think we're going to have a good session today, asking Paul questions about Paul. Knowing Paul, he'll probably also ask the audience and me some questions about us too. So that's all good. So let's welcome Paul by watching a short show reel of some programs from A&E. I mean, one of the things we need to ask, I think, is the range is enormous, isn't it, when you look at a show reel like that? It must be quite interesting, the challenge of differentiating and establishing those various different channel brands, given that enormously broad range of programs. We'll come on to that. Let's start, though, at the beginnings.
May I jump in real quick?
Okay. You can't do this. I'm meant to be interviewing you.
Okay. Well, one thing you said that was interesting to me is that, yes, we were colleagues at once, and we're definitely friends, but I never, when you were at All3 and I was at ITV, I never viewed you or any of the other production companies as competitors. I always viewed, and I try to instill this in my teams, that it's the time slot that we want to get.
Yeah.
We want to get that time slot. You know, if we don't get, if somebody else gets it, then we lose. And we always used to talk about different approaches to things.
No, I know what you mean. I mean, I don't know what anyone else in the room thinks, but I think one of the things that's most noticeable about our sector is, as often as not, you pick up the phone to a supposed competitor to ask for advice as you do one of your own colleagues, which I think is sort of curious about our business. You talk to people, I suspect, who supply washing powder to Tesco's. I don't think they do that. So I think we are an unusual industry, probably partly because people move around so much, so we all know each other, and partly because, we just value the view of the people who supposedly are our competitors. Mm-hmm. Anyway, let's talk about your career. So why did you become a television executive? Why did a nice boy growing up in Los Angeles decide to go into telly as opposed to becoming a lawyer or a dentist?
Well, I didn't know what else to do, to be honest with you. My brother is 7 years older than I am, and he works at he was working at CNN, and I used to do internships there. And my career has been not this one that's been planned and methodically approached. I needed to make money. I needed to help my family, so I had to leave school. And I got a job from a friend to start as a runner on sitcoms. And then I was off. And my career has always been through relationships like yours and through working really, really hard, just different opportunities kept coming up. And I always liked to do something new, exciting, and different. So it wasn't this like, I'm going to do this. This is my path, of ultimate passion. I actually was driven by money at first.
It's amazing how often sort of serendipity, I guess, comes into people who end up in telly. I don't know how many of the people actually had the life plan that said, I've got to go into media. I think many didn't. I'm
glad I did, though, by the way. I love it.
Yeah, and me too. Yeah. Tell us then, Paul, if you can bear to, just sort of quickly walk us through, because you've done everything from running your own business, working at Endemol, working at Fox, 20th Century Fox, obviously working at ITV, and now working at A&E. Can you sort of, the most interesting part of that, I guess, is from being, supplier to buyer, and that's quite an interesting transition. So if you can bear to sort of run through that, that would be interesting.
Okay. Well, quick story. So I started out as a runner. I was very good at, collecting meals and, getting laundry and things like that. I did that for 3 years because every year I got on a show, it was supposed to be the next big hit, and I thought this was going to be my break. Well, after 19 episodes, those shows would get canceled. and I literally thought, it was my 3rd year in, and I was thinking, I'm literally going to blow my brains out. I don't know what I'm going to do. I don't know how. But another friend called me and got on another show. That show changed my life because it was a show called The Finelli Boys. And The Finelli Boys was a sitcom which had a lot of the people that wrote for The Golden Girls. It was a big hit sitcom. And I learned more on that show, and I met more interesting people on that show about what to do, what I would do if I was a producer and what I wouldn't do if I was a producer. And they would write way into the night, 2 o'clock in the morning, 3 o'clock in the morning. And this is the time when you'd have to then make Xerox copies of the scripts, and then I would have to drive around all of Los Angeles, and I'd have to deliver 140 scripts. So I would read all the scripts, and one day it dawned on me, I was going, I think I can maybe do this. So with a friend of mine, I wrote some spec scripts. They were terrible at first, but they eventually got better, and I got signed by William Morris. From there, in the US system, there's writing rooms. I don't know if you guys know this, and it's not always single authored stories. And there's seasons. At this time, before cable was as prolific as it is today, there's these writing seasons. So I missed the writing season. I had to get a job, and this new form of television, not new, it's actually old, it was done in the 50s, reality is a mixture of a lot of different things, was emerging, and I thought, why don't I pitch some reality shows? I sold my first show to a gentleman named John Langley. He produces Cops. And John is the type of man who he didn't hit it until late in his career. And Cops changed his entire life. But he's the type of person who I admire because he said, I believe in your idea, I'm going to back you, and you're going to run the show. So from PA to executive producer in a very, very quick time. And then along the way, I started producing shows, and I loved it. And I quickly learned that producing is just dealing with a series of problems, constant problems, and how can you get through it to make your best product. And then from there, it was just a series of connections. I would read a lot about people who I admired in the industry, and their career paths. And I quickly learned that if you were very well-rounded, you could have a very long career in television. So I made a point, this was a conscious decision, that I was going to go from X job as a producer to Y job as an executive to X job as a producer. I would go back and forth because I wanted, when I got older, which I am now, that people wouldn't be able to say that I couldn't do a certain type of job. And that's what led me down to working at Chris Craft Station Group, so I learned the station group business. That's what led me to Endemol, so I wanted to see what it would be like in an overall deal with an international company. Endemol led me to, I had a meeting with Liz Murdoch, and she was kind enough to introduce me to her father, and that got me my job at 20th Television. And from there, at the same time, I was introduced to taking over Granada, as you know. And I went with the Fox job. But then I decided, I always thought if I could be in a company with a sense of scale, but apply what I learned as a small producer, I could really, really grow the business. And when we started, we had four shows in the U.S., and what always used to frustrate me was that they would say we were insignificant. We were insignificant to the ITV business. We were an outpost, and so 4 shows turned into 10 shows, turned into 20 shows, turned into 25 shows, turned into me running international and distribution, and then turned into me going and being a small part and helping them look at companies to grow that business to, I think now it's, 150 series on the air in the U.S.
And is the biggest, I think, independent.
They're definitely the biggest
US.
reality independent by far. And along the way, all my interactions with different colleagues led to other opportunities. I never got a job through a headhunter. So it was actually through my conflict and my negotiations with Nancy Dubuque, who I thought absolutely hated me because I was always on the other sides of negotiations with her, that she sat down with me one day and said, Paul, I want you to come and work for me. So that's a little snapshot of my career.
No, it's great. So talk a bit then about, and he's right, by the way, this is a man who's on a constant quest to learn. I think it's fascinating. You turn up for breakfast with Paul Buccieri and he's sitting there with some tome about management and then a whole series of experiences and talks about them like nobody else I know. I think that there's a lesson to all of us there, actually. We're always curious, I hope, to learn. So, Paul, in terms of the turning from seller to buyer then, so the recent move is from you having established this very successful, much, much bigger, no longer a rounding error business in America for ITV, which is actually the thing that I think that's written about almost most in ITV these days, certainly in terms of analyst reports.
Yes.
I mean, they're fascinated by the American business. And you've done it partly organically and partly through acquisition, admittedly.
Yeah, of course.
But nonetheless, it is now very big.
Yeah.
So having been the producer of Duck Dynasty, you then moved to being the buyer of Duck Dynasty.
Yeah, the Gurneys are the producer.
The Gurneys, but having owned the company that produced it.
I was working with them, yes.
Exactly. So being supplier to buyer, talk a bit about that in terms of sort of mindset, lessons, etc.
Sure. Well, I have a great deal of empathy for producers. I know how hard it is to be a producer. You know, a friend of mine, he's over there, Steve Morrison, and we were out to dinner last night, and there's this relentlessness you have to have when you're putting yourself out there, selling your wares, selling these shows you feel so passionate about. So I try to, and I'm trying to instill in my groups, my divisions, and they've done it definitely to a degree, but I want to, hopefully I can add some more to this, is that you have to have a sense of caring and understanding for these people to when they come in the room. And it's just not it's just not just an idea for them, it's part of their lives. So that's one thing that I hope to bring here, and I hope to bring that producer-friendly place so that people like to work with people they like. It's pretty simple, and if you're the place that people like to come to, and you're the place that likes to be collaborative, they want to be there. A&E and History and all the channels that Nancy has overseen have done a great job with that. I hope I can add a little bit more to that.
Okay. Talk to us about those channels then, please, because I think everybody in this room will know them well already, but explain to us, where is Real History on History? How do you position that? Where is, what is A&E? Is it a general entertainment channel? How does Lifetime fit into the mix? How do you counter what is obviously a tough ratings decline currently in cable in the US? Talk to us a bit about some of the challenges and the differentiation, please.
Sure. Well, there's definitely, we've had our challenges at A&E. We have. But I think A&E is very well positioned because if you look at our portfolio, on one side you have History, which is, very male skewing. Then you move over to an A&E, which is slightly more female. Sometimes it's more male depending on the hit show. It goes back and forth. Then you slide over to FYI, which is in the lifestyle space and very high end. Then you move over to Lifetime, which is women. And then you have LMN, which is a little bit more diverse. So if you take a portfolio approach to things, you go, oh, they're very well positioned. You might look at another company. There's other competitors that are more in the younger skewing space, and when that doesn't work for them, the advertisers have no place else to go. So I think we're well positioned. What we have to do better, and we always have to strive to do better, is pick and execute better shows.
And talk about the sort of brand positioning of these, because I'll say something controversial. So is Duck Dynasty properly an A&E brand? Is Queer Eye properly, I know this is not one of yours, a Bravo brand? Sure. Or is it ironically the case that some of the so-called not on-brand shows have actually been the shows that have driven the rating success of those brands? You could say the same about Discovery, I guess, and some of their channels. All of them probably, actually.
You could look at Fox and go Empire right now.
Yeah, exactly.
So, we've been talking about this a lot. We want to be first in class or we want to be best in class. And sometimes a great idea comes through the door and it's undeniable. So you have to say, we're going to take that idea. And sometimes that idea, overshadows or helps drive the brand. At A&E's best in 2004, when we moved a little bit away from an arts and entertainment to this general entertainment brand, we were very, very provocative, interesting worlds, interesting characters, a little bit darker, and we had an incredible run. Duck comes along, and it's an outlier, and we then focus a tremendous amount of attention on finding the next duck. One would say it was such an outlier that you shouldn't pull all your attention and go that direction. And I would say that Duck, while it's a show that we love having, and it does fit with us as a general entertainment brand, it pulled our focus a little bit.
That's interesting. Talk to us a bit about John Landgraf's sort of position, which is interesting. I didn't, unfortunately, actually see his session, but I know what he's been saying about sort of, particularly drama. Is there a surfeit of drama in the market generally? Is there enough demand to keep up with this apparently endless supply? Point number one. And I guess the second point is, are we actually better as a sector to be concentrating on fewer, bigger, better type shows rather than having, vast amounts of content out there with a population that only has a finite amount of time to watch it?
Yeah. At ITV, when I was overseeing distribution with Maria Kiriakou, who actually runs it, we focused on fewer, bigger, better. That was our plan. Very simple. I think that there's always room for great television. The thing that I'm going to throw to my colleague Sean on this one, who runs international for A&E, is that where I see a potential issue is these shows are supported by the international markets. And if there's so much in that market, then somebody's going to be left holding the bag. And I think the best will always have a place, but if you're mid-tier, you might get left out in the cold. And when you're carrying all these massive deficits, that's a problem. I mean, Sean, what is your view on that?
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think oh, sorry. I'm usually loud enough so that a mic is irrelevant. I think that the phrase is the death of the middle. I would agree that we're getting to a place where there's going to be simply too much content, too much dramatic content, that the best will always be bought, and will continue to rise in price, and certainly in the States. Paul, you've thrown the stat at me. There's 61 different buyers in the States for drama, 62 when Overstock got in the market. And so I think there's a lot of demand for the best, but yeah, that middle, it goes away or really drowns amidst these heavy deficits, and you end up with the best and the cheap and the cheerful.
That's good. Yeah. That's good. That's a good point, Sean.
I think that makes sense. I mean, I think I think this sort of increased globalization, I guess, as well, has made that an even more sort of interesting challenge for particularly the British producers who've always looked to America as upside, yes, and now look to America as part of the staple part of the business, yeah, and are now slightly in a bit of a spin trying to work out what the potentially reducing amount of spend on cable means to them.
I remember when we were at ITV, this was just a very few short years ago, there's a show called Selfridge. Yeah. And I was fascinated that, wow, the networks cover the entire deficit for these shows. And Selfridge was a show that we wanted to get a really high-end, American actor to take the lead, and there was going to be, the network couldn't pay the full freight for the show. And for me, it was just natural. It just coincided with me taking over international and distribution, and it was like, we're gonna deficit finance this show. It wasn't that much of a gap. I knew if we picked up 1 or 2 territories, we would instantly be in profit. And we got a great deal out of Australia, and bang, it was like, oh yeah, we'll deficit. But that was just a few short years ago, and now the prices of these shows are just so high that you need the U.S. to make them. You don't have to have it, but it's an important part of the business for the upside.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think that whole sort of integrated. The other point, I guess, is if you're a producer with no integrated distributor, your life is more difficult these days than it ever used to be as well, which I think is true. Talk a bit about digital, Paul. In your world, what's the answer to OTT, to the threat? Is it a threat? Is it an opportunity for you? The whole sort of Netflix, and Peter Fincham's comments yesterday were interesting. He views that ecosystem as being one where all these various different players can cohabit comfortably. How do you guys see that, and what have you done to address the way people are now watching television?
Well, that's been on our minds a lot, and we've been. It's a difficult question to answer given our carrier agreements and things like that in the U.S. Again, I'll throw to my colleague Sean about how we'll look at international. I hate speaking for another person's division, and I think there's great opportunity with our content and our brands outside the U.S. I don't know if you share that view.
I do. Thank you, Paul, for throwing the most difficult question to me. I appreciate that. No, look, I think first I'm going to be really reductive and say part of the last couple of years for us, and I suspect for a bunch of our peers, has been moving our focus from thinking about ourselves as a television entertainment company to a really, maybe for as cliche as it sounds, as a really a video storyteller, right? So the first thing is going back to, do we have the best ideas? Is the show good? Is the content good? And then from there, it's kind of then turning the focus to, okay, where should we put this out? And so I think it sounds like a small thing, but it's actually a big thing culturally. You're getting away from even just something as little as getting away from overnight ratings, and getting away from a culture where you're really focused on live viewing. So I think that's the first part. But I think more directly to your question, we think there's a bunch of opportunity in OTT. Outside of linear TV, whether you're talking about VOD, whether you're talking direct to consumer, whether you're talking about SVOD, we think there is an appetite evidenced by the rising video consumption on the part of viewers everywhere. There's an appetite, or there's room for consuming things across a lot of different platforms, and there's room for a lot more than just Sky and Netflix and a couple of others. And we've been, I think, careful but practical in experimenting in a lot of new platforms with partners and direct. And I think you'll continue to see us do that. But again, with an air of caution, because we have a very strong business with the affiliate partners, the folks that we came to the dance with, if you will, and we want to be careful to put our brands and content in secure and it's kind of well-lit places. Okay. Sorry for the long answer.
No, that's fine. And so
Good answer.
when you buy the programs, presumably you do an all rights deal. So those rights go into you, and then you exploit them around the world. Okay. Talk to me a little bit, Paul. You know the British market well. The PSB deal in the UK is clearly very different from that. Mm-hmm. And I guess, again, as businesses, as producers, we're looking at a world where we view our rights packages almost like portfolio products now. So we have some under PSB terms of trade, which we love because we retain the rights and we exploit them internationally. And we have some at the other end of that spectrum where we've got a Discovery deal or a Bravo deal or an A&E deal. As an American who has become very used to the way that the Brits commission content, Talk about how you see all those frameworks fitting together. Do they work together? What's your view of them?
Well, if you're asking me as producer,
Answer as producer, then you can answer as A&E.
Okay, as a producer, I love this market as a producer. The terms of trade are just wonderful, and it enables a small entrepreneurial, independent person to go out and strike his fortune. I just actually want to talk a little culturally. What I love about this market as a producer is that when you guys have conversations in terms of presenting ideas or pitches, we call them in America pitches. Here, they're more conversations, and I really embrace that. On the U.S. side, as a producer, you can make an incredibly good living under the terms of trade that we have, and as a buyer now, I'm seeing a different side of things. Armando said, we're all in this together. I laughed at that point because I was thinking at that moment where I was having on both sides of this equation. We all need to have vibrant businesses. As you know, we share the same philosophy in terms of deals. I never wanted to. If I have leverage, and leverage is the key to most deals, I always left something on the table for my partner. And with the U.S. terms of trade, I think we have very, very fair deals that give upside to our partners.
Yeah. No, it's funny. We used to, in the old days, rail slightly against the American deal, thinking it's about rights retention. How can we possibly create long-term sustainable businesses if we don't own the rights? You can, is the answer. Sure. You can sell them to people. You can sell them to Kevin Ligo.
Yeah.
But
you can definitely do that.
You can definitely do that. The point is, you're absolutely right. There is a sort of, there's a mix of different models.
Sure.
I think what appeals to us as entrepreneurs, certainly in the UK, is trying to make that mix work so that we can have the best of all worlds, frankly. We want to own some of the rights and exploit them.
Sure, you do.
We want to own the ideas, we want to come up with the ideas, and then we want also to have these long-term production margin type deals with people like you guys. But it is interesting. They are still radically different, these models, which I think is quite exciting. Okay. Paul asked me not to ask him the question, which I won't ask him, about what's he looking for, because this isn't a pitching session. But do please, nonetheless, help us understand the types of shows, because, some of the people sitting here, I think, will be people who are thinking, okay, this is an interesting place to go. I'm a producer, I've got my development slate. Explain a little about the type of thing that you stand for as a set of channels, the quality, the range, the positioning.
Okay, sure. So putting on, for those of you who are producers out there, the most valuable thing, I'll speak for the brands that I oversee, but I'll speak for the portfolio in general. The most valuable thing for us is returnable, long-running shows. It's great to have event specials. We love them. It's great to have 5-parters, 6-parters. They're great. But for you as a producer, for us as a network, when you're thinking of the idea, I always used to go into a pitch thinking, okay, if they're asking me what's episode 35 like, I always wanted to have an answer, because I wanted to show them that this is a viable show that has a long run to it, that we all can, monetize. And some people say that's a bad word. You go to that place. It's not about the creativity. Well, it is about the creativity. It's about creating a show that has long legs that we both can benefit from. So I never like to give producers a box of saying, this is the only type of show we want, this is how it works, because on the other side, when I was doing it, I would hear those exact same remits, And then they would buy something completely different, and I would go, I had that in my portfolio, I should have pitched that show. But at its core, if you think you want returnable, long-running series, we definitely see a balance between scripted and reality. We weigh more on the reality side of things. Scripted is exciting, it's dynamic, it's sexy. I mean, I love it. But our business is built on reality shows and long-running reality shows.
Okay. Yes, I mean, we obviously know that the scripted shows tend to be the louder ones, don't they? So we tend to know your Hatfields and McCoys and your Texas Rising shows. But I can imagine
it's our Pawn Stars, it's our Pickers, it's our First 48s, it's our Interventions. These are the shows that build the network.
Yeah.
And that was very, very clear to me when I first joined the company.
Okay. What will A&E look like in 5 years' time?
I think as a company, Nancy wants us to. We're not a broadcaster. We're not a producer. We're a global media company, and I think the steps that there's a lot of the international team here. Thank you for coming for A&E. We have made strides in that area to be a global. We're in over 200 territories. We take our content from the United States, but we also, Heather, she also commissions shows. She also acquires shows. She actually told me a philosophy the other night for dinner of a way she commissioned a show, and I thought it was brilliant. So we see ourselves expanding in that area. I don't view, people talk about digital, people talk about TV. I just talk about content. I never really delineate the two. It's just content to me, and it's just whatever platform we choose to put it on. So.
Do you think the Americans understand the television landscape and the future better than the Brits? Do you look at us and think, God, these poor parochial people in an island called Britain, and we are far smarter because we're bigger?
I think some people do, sure. I don't. I love it here. I remember when I first went, my first introduction to the international market is when I met Don Airy at MIP, and my eyes were opened up. And then when I, got immersed in working for ITV, and then eventually I got on the board of the studio side, I fell in love with this market. Some of the most innovative shows come out of here. Obviously, you guys are the strongest in my view in formats. I think there is a willingness, on the bigger channels side to go with an original idea that is just off a piece of paper. I had the luxury when I was running, ITV. I would have these formats, and it was almost like taking orders sometimes for some of the U.S. broadcasters. They had to know the ratings. They had to know exactly what it looked like, and I think the people who think that, what you said in terms of you guys being parochial stuff, I think they're naive.
Okay. What other than the UK and the US, which I must admit we talk probably too much about, which are your biggest other territories, and which ones are growing fastest? What's the most exciting territory for you guys?
I think Latin America is very exciting for us.
Is that English language or Spanish or?
It's both. It's both. We lost Sean. He had to leave for a plane, so I would have thrown that to him. But it's both. But I see us. I can't help but it's Sean's business. He runs it. But from my old perch, I see Asia as a really important market. And I think we have to be there. Okay. So we're there, but in a bigger way.
Are you glad you made the move? Do you miss ITV, or is it cool? Are you still excited about being at A&E?
I'm always excited about learning, as you know, and I'm always excited about challenges. And we have a challenge ahead. So just like when I was at ITV, we had a challenge ahead there. So that makes it exciting for me. I do miss my friends at ITV. We left on very good terms. I actually saw all of them last week. I do miss the international market because now my focus is the U.S. And sometimes I go, oh, I like this market. I like the people. But what I love about A&E is we have an extremely dynamic boss, in Nancy Dubuque. That always inspires me. We have one of the things that was interesting. You and I talked about this. Is people don't realize the scale of A&E. It was very similar to when I was at ITV. When I was in the U.S. 7 years ago, nobody knew what ITV was in the U.S. We weren't even called ITV. That was the first thing I did when I took over international. I changed us all to ITV. People here don't understand. We are a massive, massive company. Our partners, our owners, are Hearst and Disney. I won't give statistics, but we're bigger than most of the companies here, yeah. And we're it's not just we've decided to move into scripted in a big way with our studio. We've gone from 0 shows to 40 hours of content. We're going to have 48 hours of content. If I have my way, we'll have more than that. I'm excited by the challenges. I miss my friends. And it's just a new chapter, a new adventure.
It sounds great. Right, we're going to have a quick 2 or 3 questions, please, if anyone has any in the audience. And please fire away. There's someone over there. Thank you.
Hi.
Hi.
I'm Jasper Jackson from The Guardian. The Vice investment and that relationship, can you just tell us a bit about how that's sort of developing, and also any update on whether there's going to be a cable channel and what's happening to H2?
Yeah. I can talk about the investment. We made an investment in the Vice. We see it as a very robust, exciting company, and really that's all I can talk about.
Any other questions on less sensitive topics? No? Oh, one more from this lady here, down the front. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Talusha. I work in comedy commissioning. You were talking about international markets, and I was thinking about something that hasn't come up at all week in the sessions I've been in, which is people just stealing content. That seems to be now off the agenda. It was a really big anxiety in the industry a few years back. What's happened? Because when I visit India, I've made a few shows in India, everyone is watching stuff illegally. They're watching all the US shows and no one's paying for them.
Yeah, that's a really, really, when I worked at Fox, Peter Chernin was, I thought, ahead of his time, really, really banging on about piracy and the stealing of content. To me, it's as big an issue now, probably even bigger, because it's the monetization of these shows that help us produce new shows and keeps us all employed. So I think we should push an eye more onto that. I think you're absolutely right that it's sort of gone down in the conversation, and it's going to be even more tricky, and it is even more tricky now, with the digital proliferation. So.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, you're right, though. It hadn't occurred to me. We talked about it endlessly, do you remember? We've just sort of slightly fallen off our agenda. We still care about it, I guess, as much. Maybe part of the answer is we're making these programs available more freely on various platforms and hopefully are monetizing better. We're certainly running through Little Dot, quite a successful now claiming business where we claim illegally uploaded content. So maybe the answer is we've found ways to try to monetize stuff that has actually been put up illegally, or we take it down. But it's a good question. Maybe we need to put that back on the agenda slightly more prominently.
I agree.
Any other questions from anyone? Unbelievably punctually. Oh, one more. Thank you. And then I think this is probably our last question, if that's okay.
Thank you. Jane from Sky Vision. A lot of the reality content on the mothership brands is unapologetically American, and it's what you've built your success on. Interested in the commissioning from the US network's perspective, to what extent are you taking into account the tastes of your hundreds of international channels?
I think we do. We are starting to take an interest in that. I've had a lot of discussions this week about that, specifically as it relates to history and how we can, actually put out several tent poles a year in that area and work collaboratively with our partners within the company. I think it's a big priority for us.
Thank you.
Hope I answered your question.
So thank you very much to Paul for this morning's
guys, by
session.
the way.
Thank you, audience. And I also need to thank our sponsors, Creative Scotland and the British Film Commission. So thank you very much.